You're holding something in your hand. You've been holding it for a long time. Your fingers have curled around it so completely that you've forgotten what it feels like to open them. The object itself might be small, almost weightless, but your hand has grown tired. The muscles ache, the tendons have tightened. And still you hold on because letting go feels like losing something, like falling, like becoming less than what you are. This is where we begin when we talk about renunciation. Not with grand gestures or dramatic departures, but with this quiet ache in the hand. This tension that has become so familiar we mistake it for strength. In the Buddhist path, renunciation is often misunderstood. The word itself sounds severe, like deprivation, like turning away from life. But the Buddha spoke of it differently. He called it nekkhamma, which means stepping out, moving away from entanglement, not because the world is evil or pleasure is wrong, but because clinging creates suffering, because the hand that grips too tightly cannot receive anything new. Take a breath now. Feel the air move in, feel it move out. Notice that breathing itself is an act of letting go. You cannot hold the breath forever. You cannot keep the inhale. The body knows this. The body releases without being told, without needing permission, without mourning what has passed. But the mind does not trust this rhythm. The mind wants to keep what feels good, push away what feels bad, and freeze everything in between. It wraps itself around experiences, around people, around ideas of who we should be, and it squeezes. Not because it's cruel, but because it believes this is how we survive. This is how we matter. This is how we prove we exist. So we hold on. We hold on to relationships that have already ended. We hold on to versions of ourselves that no longer fit. We hold on to anger because it feels like justice, to worry because it feels like care, to business because it feels like purpose. And beneath all of it, beneath every tight grip, is fear. The fear that if we let go, we will disappear. But look at the hand again, the one that's been holding. What if you could soften the fingers just slightly? Not drop what you're carrying, not throw it away, but simply loosen the grip. What happens in that small space? There's sensation, perhaps tingling, perhaps warmth, perhaps the blood returning to places it couldn't reach before. The hand is still a hand. You are still you, but something has shifted. This is what renunciation offers. Not loss, but release. Not emptiness, but space. The Buddha left his palace, and we often tell that story as if he rejected comfort, as if he turned his back on love. But perhaps he simply opened his hand. He saw that no amount of pleasure could be held permanently. He saw that clinging to comfort was its own kind of prison. And so he stepped out, not because he hated his life, but because he wanted to be free. Freedom here doesn't mean having nothing. It means not being owned by what you have. It means you can enjoy the warmth of the sun without demanding it never set. You can love someone without needing them to complete you. You can have preferences without turning them into requirements for your peace. Notice the sounds around you right now. They come and they go. You don't have to hold them. You don't have to keep them. They arise, they pass, and you remain. This is the nature of all experience. It moves through us like breath, like weather, like seasons. Renunciation is simply learning to let it move. In the weeks ahead, we'll explore what this means in practice, how to recognize what we're gripping, how to distinguish between healthy boundaries and fearful clinging, how to let go without collapsing, without pretending we don't care, without numbing ourselves to life. We'll look at the small renunciations that happen every day, the ones that don't require leaving anything behind, only softening toward what is. But for now, just this. Your hand, your breath, your willingness to feel the ache of holding. That's enough. That's where freedom begins. Not in the letting go itself, but in noticing that you have a choice, that the grip is yours, that you can, even for a moment, soften. There is a way we hold things that feels like safety, a job title, a relationship, a story about who we used to be or who we might become. We wrap our fingers around these things the way you might grip a stone underwater, believing somehow that the weight in your hand will help you rise to the surface. And for a while, it feels necessary. It feels like the only solid thing in a shifting current. But the stone does not help you float. It never has. And the tighter you hold it, the more your arm begins to ache. The Buddha spoke clearly about this. Clinging is the origin of suffering. What you grasp grasps you in return. This is not philosophy. It is something you can feel in your body right now if you turn your attention toward it. There is likely something you are holding that you have not set down in years. Maybe it is a resentment. Maybe it is an old identity that no longer fits but still demands your loyalty. Maybe it is the belief that if you just keep trying harder, something will finally click into place and you will be complete. You can notice the exhaustion without fixing it. That is where this begins. Renunciation sounds like deprivation. It sounds like giving up what matters. But that is not what it is. Renunciation is the act of noticing what is already exhausting you and choosing not to carry it one more step. It is not about becoming less. It is about becoming unbound. Think of the hand holding the stone. The water is cool. The current moves around you, but your attention is locked on keeping your fingers tight. You cannot feel the water. You cannot let the current carry you. All you know is the weight and the effort. And after enough time, you forget that opening your hand is even possible. This is what clinging does. It narrows your world to the thing you are holding. Everything else becomes background. You stop noticing the spaciousness that was always there. You stop noticing that the water itself would hold you if you let it. The teaching is not asking you to let go of everything at once. It is not asking you to become detached or indifferent. It is simply pointing to the difference between holding and being held. One is effort. The other is trust. One tightens, the other opens. You might notice this in small ways first. A conversation where you are gripping tightly to being right. A plan you keep revising because it has to be perfect before you begin. A memory you return to again and again, as if reviewing it will change what happened. These are stones, and you are underwater, wondering why it is so hard to breathe. The practice here is quiet. It does not require a decision or a dramatic gesture. It only requires awareness. Notice one thing today you are holding that feels heavy and name it silently. Not to judge it, not to solve it, just to see it clearly. To feel the shape of it in your hand. To notice the tension in your fingers. You might name it as a thought. I am holding the belief that I should be further along by now. You might name it as a feeling. I am holding anger at what was said last week. You might name it as a habit. I am holding this phone, scrolling, because I do not want to feel what is underneath. The naming itself is the beginning of release. Not because naming makes it disappear, but because naming brings it into the light. And in the light, you can see that it is not fused to you. It is something you picked up, which means it is something you can set down. The stone underwater is only useful if you believe you need it. And most of what we cling to out of that same belief. We think it is holding us together. We think without it, we will fall apart. But the opposite is true. The clinging is what fractures us. The holding is what makes us small. When you let the stone go, it sinks, and you rise. Not because you pushed yourself upward, but because the water was always ready to hold you. That is what renunciation reveals. Not emptiness, not loss, but the quiet presence of something that was supporting you all along, waiting for you to stop fighting it. You do not have to believe this. You only have to notice. Notice what it feels like to hold tightly. Notice the ache. Notice the way your attention tunnels. And then notice what happens when you soften your grip, even slightly. There is a difference. You can feel it. That difference is freedom. There is a way of holding things that does not squeeze. A bird may land on your open palm, rest there for a moment, and leave when it is ready. It stays not because your fingers have closed around it, but because the hand remains open. This is the shape of renunciation, though we have learned to fear the word. We think letting go means tearing something away from ourselves. We imagine emptiness, coldness, a life drained of color and warmth. We believe that if we stop grasping what we love, what gives us pleasure, what makes us feel safe, we will become less than we are, smaller, diminished. So we hold tight, and the tighter we hold, the more we feel the ache in our hands. But release is not rejection. It is the end of struggle with what already moves. Everything you love is already in motion. The people, the feelings, the moments of beauty, the sense of who you are, all of it is shifting breath by breath. Renunciation is not the act of pushing these things away. It is the recognition that they were never still enough to be grasped in the first place. When you try to hold water in a closed fist, it leaks through your fingers. When you cup your hands loosely, the water rests there, clear and cool, until it evaporates or spills in its own time. The difference is not in the water. It is in the shape of your hands. Consider something small in your life right now. Not the largest attachment, not the deepest fear. Something modest. Perhaps it is the way you want your morning to unfold without interruption. Perhaps it is a preference for how someone speaks to you, or a hope that a particular plan will succeed. Notice how you hold it. Notice the subtle tension in wanting it to stay exactly as it is. This is where practice begins. Not with the grand renunciations, not with walking away from your whole life. Just this one small thing. Today, you might choose it and practice holding it lightly. Not by pretending you do not care, not by numbing yourself or building walls, but by letting it rest in an open hand. What does that feel like? It feels like breathing while you wait. It feels like noticing the tightness in your chest when the thing starts to slip away, and not adding more tightness on top of it. It feels like seeing your own grip and softening it, just slightly, just enough to let the circulation return. The bird on your palm does not stay because you deserve it or because you have done everything right. It stays because there is no threat. The moment your hand begins to close, the bird feels it not as cruelty, but as danger. It lifts and flies, and you are left holding only air and the memory of feathers. We close our hands out of love sometimes, out of fear of loss. We think that if we do not hold tight, everything will leave. But the tightness itself is what creates the leaving. The struggle is what exhausts us. When you stop struggling with what is already moving, you do not lose it faster. You simply stop hurting yourself against its nature. This does not mean you stop caring. It does not mean you become indifferent or cold. The open hand is not an empty hand. It is a hand that can feel the warmth of the bird's feet, the slight shift of its weight, the softness of its presence. A closed fist feels none of this. It feels only its own effort, so the practice is simple, though not always easy. You choose one thing, one small attachment. Maybe it is wanting someone to text you back quickly. Maybe it is wanting your body to feel a certain way today. Maybe it is wanting the weather to cooperate, or the traffic to be light, or your mind to be calm. You notice how you hold it. You feel the clench, the subtle demand that it be exactly as you want. And then, without force, you let your hand open just a little. You do not throw the thing away. You do not pretend it does not matter. You simply stop squeezing. What happens next is not up to you. The bird may stay or go. The thing you wanted may come or not come. But your hand is no longer cramped. The ache begins to ease. You are still here, still whole, still capable of feeling warmth. This is renunciation, not loss but freedom. Not rejection, but the end of struggle. You are learning to let life move through your open hands, and in that openness, you are finally able to feel what was there all along. We spend so much of our lives gathering. Objects, titles, relationships, identities. We arrange them carefully around us like walls of a house we hope will keep us safe. And somewhere along the way, without quite noticing, we begin to believe that we are the house. That if the walls come down, we will disappear with them. A river flows freely because it does not try to hold its water. It moves through the landscape without grasping at what passes through it. The river does not say, "This drop is mine, I must keep it." It simply flows. But we are not taught to flow. We are taught to accumulate, to build, to protect what we have built. And so we carry our possessions like stones in our pockets, growing heavier with each year, each achievement, each thing we decide we cannot live without. The Zen teachers understood this weight. They watched students arrive carrying their ideas about enlightenment, their concepts of wisdom, their carefully constructed spiritual identities. And they would say, "Empty your cup, only then can you taste the tea." The cup in your hands right now is already full. Full of who you think you are, full of what you believe you need, full of the story you have been telling yourself about why these things matter. why they define you, why letting go would mean losing yourself entirely. But that fullness is not nourishment, it is only weight. You can feel it sometimes, can't you? The exhaustion of maintaining, the constant vigilance required to protect what you have claimed as yours, the fear that moves through you when something you identify with is threatened. That fear is not protecting you. It is showing you where you have confused yourself with something that was never you to begin with. Sit quietly for a moment. Not to fix anything, not to improve, just to sit. And when you are ready, ask yourself this: if I let go of this one thing, what part of me is still here? Choose something small at first. Not the big identities, not the central pillars. Maybe it's an opinion you've held tightly. Maybe it's a grudge, a plan, a way you've insisted things must be. Hold it in your awareness the way you might hold a stone in your hand. Feel its weight, its texture. The way your fingers have curved around it from holding it so long. And then imagine opening your hand. What happens in that space? What remains when the stone is no longer there? You might expect to feel empty, diminished. But if you stay with the question, if you don't rush to fill the space with something new, you may notice something unexpected. The hand that opens is still a hand. The awareness that watches is still aware. You have not disappeared. You have simply stopped pretending that the stone was your hand. The river flows through valleys and over rocks, and it does not become the valley or the rock. It touches them, moves around them, and continues. When the landscape changes, the river does not panic. It does not cling to the old path. It finds its way through what is actually here. This is what renunciation points toward, not deprivation, not rejection, but the freedom that comes when you stop insisting that things be other than they are, when you stop building your sense of self from what you can control or keep or display. You are not your job title, though you may have one. You are not your bank account, though it may rise and fall. You are not your reputation, your collection, your carefully curated image. These things move through your life the way water moves through a riverbed. They are real. They have effects, but they are not you. When you sit with the practice of letting go, you are not trying to achieve some purified state of non-attachment. You are simply looking clearly at what is already true. That everything you think you own is already leaving. That every identity you've constructed is already shifting. That the self you've been defending so carefully is not a solid thing that needs defending. It is more like a verb than a noun, a process, a flowing. The question is not whether you will let go. Everything lets go eventually. The question is whether you will practice letting go while you are still here, still breathing, still able to notice what remains when the grasping stops. Sit with that question, not once but again and again. Let it become familiar. Let the practice of opening your hand become as natural as breathing. And in the spaces between holding and releasing, you may begin to taste what the Zen teachers were pointing toward. Not emptiness as absence, but emptiness as room, as freedom, as the quiet that exists before you fill it with claims about who you are. The river does not mourn the water that has already flowed past. It simply continues, meeting each moment with the whole of itself, holding nothing back, carrying nothing forward that does not serve the flowing. We spend so much of our lives adding another task, another purchase, another plan. We layer on commitments and possessions as if they were insulation against uncertainty. The mind believes that if we just gather enough knowledge, enough security, enough approval, we will finally feel safe. But the weight grows heavier, and the promised relief never quite arrives. There is a teaching in the Mahana tradition that points in the opposite direction. The path is not found by gathering more, but by needing less. This is not about deprivation or forcing yourself to live with scarcity. It is about recognizing what is already here, already sufficient, already whole. Think of a tree in winter. The leaves have fallen. The branches are bare. There is no decoration, no excess, and yet the tree is not diminished. It stands in the cold air, rooted and alive, needing nothing extra to be what it is. The tree does not mourn its leaves or rush towards spring. It rests in the season it occupies, complete in its simplicity. We are not so different, but we forget. We look at the bare branches of our lives and feel a kind of panic. We think something is missing. We think we need to add color, noise, distraction. We reach for the next thing before we have even touched the one in front of us. Renunciation, in the Buddhist sense, is not about rejecting the world. It is about letting go of the compulsion to fill every space. It is the recognition that accumulation is not the same as nourishment. That more is not always better. That sometimes the most radical act of freedom is to stop adding and simply be with what remains. You can feel this in small moments. You open a closet and see clothes you have not worn in years. You scroll through saved articles you will never read. You notice the subtle tension in agreeing to one more thing when your body is already asking for rest. Each addition carries a cost, even if we do not name it. Each thing we hold takes up space. Not just physical space, but attention, energy, the quiet room inside where clarity lives. The practice here is not dramatic. It does not require you to give away everything you own or retreat from your responsibilities. It begins with a single pause. Today, before you add something new, a commitment, a purchase, a plan, pause and ask yourself if you already have enough. Not in a harsh or judgmental way, but with genuine curiosity. What would it feel like to let this moment be sufficient as it is? This question is not about scarcity thinking. It is not about denying yourself what you need. It is about distinguishing between need and the restless urge to acquire. The urge often masquerades as necessity, but when you pause, you can feel the difference. Need is steady and clear. The urge is anxious, reaching, never quite satisfied. When you pause before adding, you create a small gap. In that gap, you might notice that you already have what you were looking for. Or you might see that the thing you were about to add would not bring the relief you imagined. You might simply feel the quiet dignity of sufficiency. The sense that this moment, this breath, this life as it is right now, is enough. The tree in winter does not think about what it lacks. It does not compare itself to the tree in spring. It stands in its own season, bare and alive, and that is its wholeness. You can return to this image when the impulse to add arises. You can ask yourself what it would be like to be bare in this way, not empty, but unburdened. Not lacking, but free. Renunciation is often misunderstood as loss, but it is closer to release. When you let go of what you do not need, you are not diminished. You are lighter. You have more room to move, more space to breathe, more capacity to notice what is actually present. The things you truly need do not disappear. They become clearer, easier to see, because they are not buried under layers of excess. This is not a one-time decision. It is a practice that unfolds slowly in small gestures. You pause before adding another item to your cart. You notice the impulse to fill silence with noise. You let a weekend remain open instead of scheduling every hour. Each pause is an act of trust, that you are enough, that what you have is enough, that this moment does not need to be different to be complete. The path is not found by gathering more, but by needing less. And needing less is not about doing without. It is about discovering what has been here all along, quiet and sufficient, waiting beneath the weight of everything we thought we had to carry. You have been carrying something for a long time. You may not remember picking it up, but you feel its weight in the way you move through your day. The tightness in your chest when certain thoughts arrive, the way you brace yourself before opening your phone or stepping into a conversation. Renunciation sounds like a word for monks and mystics, but it begins much closer than that. It begins with the moment you set down what you no longer need to hold. Most of us imagine letting go as something dramatic, a grand gesture, a burning of bridges or a public declaration. We think we will feel lighter immediately, triumphant even, as if freedom announces itself with fanfare. But liberation is not loud. It is the breath you did not know you were holding. It arrives quietly, like the relief that comes when you finally put down a heavy bag at the end of a long walk. The moment is so ordinary, you almost forget you carried it. The Buddha spoke often of renunciation, but not as deprivation. He did not ask his students to suffer for the sake of purity. He pointed instead to the simple fact that clinging is exhausting. Holding on takes energy. Defending what we think we need takes energy. Even wanting something very badly, over and over, takes energy. And when we stop, when we let the hand open, there is space. Not emptiness in the painful sense, just room to breathe. You might notice this in small ways before you see it in large ones. You are scrolling, caught in a loop of comparison or outrage, and then you close the app, not because you decided to be disciplined, not because you made a rule. You just stop. And for a moment, there is quiet. Or you are in the middle of an argument, about to say the thing that will win the point, and you do not say it. The silence that follows is not defeat, it is rest. This is renunciation. Not the absence of desire, but the moment when desire loses its grip. Not the killing of attachment, but the quiet discovery that you are already free to put it down. We miss this because we are waiting for something more significant. We think freedom must be hard won, that it should cost us something visible. So we overlook the small releases that happen throughout the day. The thought you do not chase. The story you do not need to finish. The plan you let dissolve without panic. These are not failures of will. They are moments when the hand opens on its own. The bag you carried was real. Its weight shaped your posture, the way you walked, what you could see along the path. But when you set it down, you do not always notice right away. You keep walking as if it is still there. Your shoulders stay tense. Your breathing stays shallow. It takes time to realize the burden is gone. This is why renunciation can feel so unremarkable. The freedom was already present. You were simply too busy carrying to feel it. There is a practice here, but it is not about trying harder. It is about noticing. Just once today, see if you can catch the moment when you let go without effort. It might be a sigh that empties your lungs completely. It might be the end of a conversation where you stop needing to be right. It might be the thought that drifts away before you grab it. When you notice this, do not congratulate yourself. Do not turn it into evidence of progress. Just rest there. Feel what it is like to not be holding. This is not about becoming someone who renounces everything. It is about recognizing that letting go is already happening. You do it without thinking. You do it in your sleep. The body knows how to release tension. The mind knows how to let thoughts pass. You have been doing this your entire life. The only question is whether you notice. When you do notice, even once, something shifts. Not because you have achieved anything, but because you see that freedom is not something you earn. It is something you stop preventing. The bag was always yours to set down. The breath was always there to take. Liberation does not require a dramatic gesture. It requires only that you stop insisting it must look a certain way. So today, just once, notice. And when you do, rest. We have been sitting with this word, renunciation, and perhaps by now it feels less like a command and more like an opening. Not something we must do, but something that happens when we stop holding so tightly. The hand relaxes. The breath moves through. And what we thought we needed to keep begins to release on its own. This is not about becoming someone who owns nothing or desires nothing. It is about noticing what it feels like to carry less, to walk through a day without the constant inner negotiation of wanting and resisting, to let the mind rest in what is here without always reaching for what is not. There are moments when this happens naturally. You finish a conversation and realize you are not performing. You are simply there. Or you sit in a room as the light changes and there is no thought of what comes next, just the dimming, the quiet, the way shadows soften along the wall. In those moments, nothing has been renounced, but nothing is being grasped either. And there is a kind of freedom in that, small and ordinary and complete. Renunciation, in its true sense, is not the rejection of life. It is the willingness to meet life without adding our endless commentary, without insisting it be other than it is, without clinging to the pleasant or pushing away the difficult. It is a softening, not a hardening. A way of being present that does not demand the world conform to our preferences. This does not mean we stop caring. It means we care without the desperation that comes from believing our happiness depends on controlling outcomes. We can want things, we can work toward things, but we do not collapse when they do not arrive as planned. We do not harden when they slip away. We remain soft, open, able to receive what comes next. The Buddha spoke often of letting go, but he also spoke of balance. He tried extreme asceticism and found it did not lead to freedom. He tried indulgence and found the same. What he discovered was a middle way, a path that honors the body, the heart, the mind, without being ruled by their demands. Renunciation is not about denying these parts of ourselves. It is about not letting them dictate every choice, every reaction, every moment of our days. When we practice this, even in small ways, we begin to notice a shift. The mind becomes less crowded. There is space between one thought and the next. We are less reactive, less driven by old patterns. We can see a desire arise and not immediately move toward it. We can feel discomfort and not immediately try to fix it. We learn to wait, to watch, to let things unfold without our constant interference. And in that waiting, something settles. Imagine a pond. All day, the surface has been disturbed. Wind, rain, the movement of creatures beneath. But as evening comes, the air stills. The water, left alone, begins to calm. The ripples fade. The surface becomes smooth, reflective, clear. Nothing has been added. Nothing has been taken away. The pond has simply been allowed to return to its nature. This is what happens in the mind when we stop disturbing it with constant grasping and pushing. When we stop insisting that this moment be different. The thoughts still come, feelings still rise and fall, but they move through more easily. They do not stick. And beneath them, there is a stillness that was always there, waiting to be noticed. You do not have to force this stillness. You do not have to achieve it. It is already present. Renunciation is simply the practice of stepping back, of letting the water settle, of trusting that clarity will emerge when we stop stirring the surface. So as you move from this time of listening, carry this image with you. The pond at evening, the rain that falls without asking permission, the river that flows without clinging to any one place. Let your own mind be like this. Let it move, let it rest, let it return to stillness in its own time. And if you wish to continue, there are other reflections waiting. Not because you need them, but because sometimes it helps to sit in this kind of attention a little longer, to let the teaching settle the way silt settles in still water, slowly, quietly, without force. For now, this is enough.